Hey, this is Brett again. Kind of a chilly morning on the porch here in North Carolina. This morning, it's April 1st, so I guess it's April Fool's Day today. And there's a lot of foolish stuff going on every day. I don't think we need a special day for stupid. I don't think we need a special day for tricking people. I think it goes on all the while. But I want to talk about semantics and how language changes. In my observation, language changes when people don't like to feel uncomfortable with something that is true. They don't like the name of something that makes them feel uncomfortable. Maybe it makes them feel shameful or guilty, and so they rename it. They do a reset on the concept, and we begin to think differently about the concept because of the repeated use of a new term. And I suppose the first time this sort of stood out for me was when, and I'm a veteran, and I'm the father of a veteran, and I'm the son of a veteran, and I am the brother-in-law of a veteran. I'm also the son-in-law, when my wife's father was alive, of a career Air Force veteran. And some of the people that I'm still interested in talking to are veterans. And I know that in World War I, when veterans came back from combat, a lot of them were traumatized because it's scary. And it's really dangerous. And real danger changes people, and real trauma changes people. And this change was referred to as shell shock. Shell shock. It's very accurate, because when an explosive goes off near anybody, they jump. When a little tiny firecracker goes off next to a person sitting in a lawn chair, they jump. And when something that produces a lot of shrapnel goes off and blows people up all around you, blood in the air, on you, it's shocking. The shell explodes and you are shocked. Again and again and again and again. And I think when we spoke about our veterans coming back with shell shock, the language, the semantics of shell shock was clear. You get an image of a shell, and then you get the feeling of being shocked just from these two words. And I think that it would, in many people, cause empathy. It would elicit compassion back then. And we hear about the greatest generation in World War II, where they saw even more of it, and bigger explosions, and greater carnage, and a shift from being a static target in a trench during World War I to a more modern form of warfare that was more, I hate to use this word, effective. And I think that people began when such things as nuclear weapons and bombing aircraft were ubiquitous during conflict, people began to wonder, why are we doing this? We were just in a world war, and now we're in another one. And the term shell shock changed. They began to call it battle fatigue. You see the shift? It goes from the violence of a shell exploding and shocking you to now you're just tired from fighting. It's an entirely different semantic. Nowadays they call it PTSD. And that puts it firmly in the realm of psychology. I really don't think that shell shock and battle fatigue would have fit in that DSM-3 the way that PTSD does. Now that we call it PTSD, it's so very scientific sounding that it seems as though you're going to need a professional, someone that's been to college a whole lot and knows how to write prescriptions and how to use their tongue, their voice, to get you through your post-traumatic stress disorder, your shell shock, your battle fatigue. It's all the same thing. But when it was called shell shock and when it was called battle fatigue, it didn't sound clinical, especially with shell shock. It sounded human, something that would happen to someone who lives on your street. Because we had a draft back then. Everybody potentially had skin in the game. And our Congress thought about war a lot differently when they themselves had served in war. It's 2025 and we don't have many veterans in legislating in our country. And we have a whole lot of profiteers who've never been in any greater danger than maybe running out of money to get another drink tonight, forgetting their credit card. My, that's shocking. That's going to fatigue you. That's going to stress you into a disorder, not having enough money to do the things you like to do. I spell semantics with dollar signs for S's for a reason. Because when semantics changes, it generally moves away from something that love can fix to something that money can fix. Semantics for profit make the word fit like a pro into the banker's vocabulary, into the vocabulary of Ivy League schools. Why are they so expensive? Semantics for profit. Another one I started thinking about when I was making a recording the other day, I was talking about all these things that I do: painting, music, making videos, making audio recordings and attaching photography to them and creating short films and stuff. Everything that I do is, some people would call it art, because art has a lot of denominations, as it were, places where you can express. Nowadays, it seems to me that it's gotten away from the individual artist, the individual creative person, using their imagination and their intelligence and their experience to capture experience, capture their thoughts in some way, in a form that is static. You can go back and refer to it. It's been captured, you know. They talk about quantum physics. Things change when you look at them, right? And I think a lot of us have behaviors in our life in which we document life in ways, and I would call a person like that an artist. I would call a musician an artist. I would call a painter an artist. I would call a writer an artist. I would even call a journalist an artist in most cases, if they're not selling something. But now we seem to call artists, because of the ubiquity of a for-profit platform, the internet, for people to make diary entries in whatever way they wish and lock them into place by exporting whatever you've created into a form that can be observed by another. And there's this term now, they say that a lot of people, particularly on YouTube and other digital platforms where media can be shared and exchanged, people like me now are called content creators. Content creators. Artists are creators, but the whole notion of content is a corporate change in semantics, which moves our creativity into a commercial space. Think about that. You know, those of us that learn about the lives of artists, Vincent van Gogh comes to mind. A lot of these people died in abject poverty, a total mess, as though they had shell shock. You know, was Vincent really eating paint? He was a content creator, you know. He wrote, he painted, he organized stuff around so that it pleased him. He put it in new arrangements. That's a kind of art. And semantics for profit. So let's change what we used to call an artist and call him a content creator, because their art needs to go into a container. What is content? It's something which is contained. That's all it is, right? The content of a pan might be peas or corn. But at any rate, now we're all content creators. We're not artists anymore. We're producers of stuff that can be put in someone's container, someone's storage unit, someone's digital business place, and we compromise ourselves by agreeing to place it there and give away. This is the weird thing. Now that we're content creators, our content almost instantaneously belongs to the platform for their use. That's their way of saying thank you to the creators of the content that makes them wealthy. It doesn't make us wealthy. People who create have become the factories and the industry producers, having done the hard work of living long enough to create something about the life you've lived. And here comes YouTube and Facebook, Instagram, and we've given them universities and libraries full of our creativity to profit from. The semantics of profit. All right, now I'm going to talk about the semantics of profit. And I want to start off by reading from this article that I found after doing a search about the subject of the condition of being shell-shocked. British Literature Wiki. There's no author listed here. I hunted all over the place and I couldn't find an author. But the title of the article is Shell Shock as a Metaphor in the Modernist Novels of Ford and Wolfe. And it's really interesting. So I'm going to read it. And it says, the First World War caused unprecedented physical destruction, emotional devastation, and loss of life. Quote, there'd never been a war on the same scale, and no one had ever seen anything like the varying degrees of mental breakdown among soldiers or experienced it in such massive numbers, unquote. Although the war was not fought on British soil, its after effects rippled through British society, affecting politics, art, and literature. During the war and long after, there were thousands of soldiers plagued by a destructive illness, largely unknown to doctors before the onset of the war, which they termed shell shock, believing the cause to be close proximity to exploding shells. Veterans were exhibiting strange and seemingly unrelated symptoms that ranged in severity and baffled doctors as to the appropriate treatment. Many veterans suffering from shell shock were accused of malingering to shirk their military duty. The confusion surrounding the legitimacy of shell shock as an illness, the lack of effective treatment, and the veterans' reintroduction into polite society. Polite society isn't usually very polite. That's my insertion. While they still suffered physical, mental, and emotional effects of the horrors of war, created a considerable challenge and caused significant tension in a society still reeling in World War I's aftermath. The article continues to say that in the works of authors like Virginia Woolf, Ford Madox Ford, James Joyce, T.S. Eliot, definitely Joseph Conrad, and E.M. Forster. I read a lot of these people when I was in college, and others, that we are seeing modernism occur in literature, and modernism, I think, is a post-reset mindset. After about 100 years, really, I think the War of 1812 all the way up through World War II was one continuous, for some people a movable feast, for most people a steamroller. But anyways, in modernism, I'm going to finish reading here shortly. It says, it's most helpful to think of modernism in terms of, quote, a set of tendencies and shared concerns rather than a consistent or unified mode of expression. Okay, you get that? It's not consistent, and it has disunity in it. Okay, and it says that these modernist writers broke from the Victorian tradition. And on both sides of my family, I was born into the remnant, the detritus of the Victorian tradition, because both sides of the family had some old money in it. And It's mentioned here that the breakdown of boundaries might be liberating, but the breakdown of boundaries can have victims and hence become a degrading or horrifying act. It's the product of people who have war on their minds. And I'm going to stop reading from this article, but I will say that if you search for shell shock as a metaphor in the modernist novels of Ford and Wolfe, within the University of Delaware, udel.edu site, I think you will find it. Okay, so anyways, I'm going to close out this article here and kind of concentrate on my reflections here. Okay, so I've lived long enough. It's kind of a numinous number of years. I'm in my 66th year. And I've lived long enough and around enough people, you know, I think 8 states I've lived or worked in Asia, you know, the Philippines, South Korea, Japan, Canada, all of that. I've met people from different cultures, all ages. I've never shied away from poor people, so their experience is part of my experience. And I've lived long enough to watch. I kind of do believe we're in, you know, what the Old Testament referred to as the time of Jacob's trouble, right? The last reset for this, for the time of nations, the times of nations, the last era, because I've lived long enough to see hospitals privatized and subsequently the creation of a universe of profit-driven businesses and nonprofits that can suck away privately what other people need. And I've lived long enough to watch post-war public education in America. I started school, I think it was in 1965, kindergarten. I've watched public education go through 100 fads nationally. Every one of them attached to a profit goal. Every single one. And if I've seen 100 of those things, I saw half of that occur when the shift from print media to digital media happened. Y2K. People said, oh my God, I'm going to lose all my money. Our bank accounts are going to vanish. Blah, 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 blah. There was a tectonic shift in literacy right at the end of the 1990s. And not for the good. I was an English teacher in a middle school for 17 years here in North Carolina, after getting my certification up in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. In the first few years that we taught, you know, there would be all kinds of fury and passion during the book adoption meetings that the English department would have, back when we were buying books and paperback sets of novels and so forth. And somebody was always making money, not necessarily amongst us, but certainly beginning at the county level, central office, I'm sure. There are not a lot of poor people in administration. We'll just leave it at that. You often wonder, to whom were old properties, real estate owned by the school system that once had schools on them, to whom were they sold? When you go there now and there is a sign that says private property, to whom was it sold? For how much? And where did that money go? And how come the county commissioners aren't talking about it either? It's not about who, it's about what. But anyways, profit motive. Materialism has just completely, like a giant sponge, has descended on a table and soaked up everything interesting that was ever on it. And now it's content. It's in somewhere that I don't like. I think a lot of people don't like it. And so anyways, I've been thinking a lot about semantics, shell shock, battle fatigue, PTSD, and things like that. And my most recent semantic, I don't know, is it an aha, epiphany, is how we don't really call people artists anymore without hyphenating it. Recording artist, visual artist, right? It's kind of like Christian nationalist. When you put the hyphen on something, it gets granular perhaps in a way it ought not be. And now we have content creators. What used to be an artist is now a content creator.